The following is a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
President Biden this week gave his State of the Union address, and what an address it was. I'm going to be talking about what happened, what went well, and what I thought was absurd about it, let alone all the shenanigans that took place during the State of the Union, and also be doing some fact-checking of the speech done by Biden. And in response to Biden's State of the Union, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders from Arkansas did her own rebuttal to the State of the Union. I will be reviewing her rebuttal in its entirety and blasting her for all the BS she has pushed out. All this on this week's event of Current Events on Tap. Episode of Current Events on Tap with your host, Alex Kirsch, a podcast from the Alex Kirsch Project. That's me, Army retiree, truck driver, pragmatic progressive, political commentator. If this is your first time listening, please do me a solid and hit like and share and subscribe to my Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. This podcast gives you this week's current events, and I also do like what I like to call
the Beer of the Week.
The Beer of the Week is where I pick one beer and I review it based upon price and presentation, pour, aroma, taste, and then I give it an overall rating. Be sure to catch me every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker and catch me at your earliest convenience on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, as always. Just type in the Alex Kirsch Project or Current Events on Tap and you will find this podcast. Be advised, there could very well be some coarse language in this podcast. I do apologize, but I am a veteran and I'm a truck driver. It's kind of part of my vocabulary, so hopefully everyone has had a good, busy week. I had a good, busy week. It was slightly snowy earlier, but the weather has actually been somewhat cooperating and whatnot, and hopefully it stays that way because it makes it so much easier for me to get out of my driveway when it's not slick with snow and ice and whatnot. It makes it a little bit more of a pain in the ass to get in and out of. But we've got carpet installed in our bedroom now, and it looks amazing. Holy crap. And we get the rest of it installed tomorrow. And I tell you what, it just is so exciting to know that we are making consistent progress. It's been slow going because we've been living in this house for over a year. And we've been making slow but steady progress on getting this house set up. But I tell you what, though, it's going to be worth it in the long run. And I cannot wait till we can actually, because, it sucks because, we've had stuff in boxes. And it's not like it's anything to be ashamed of, but it's just we've had so much stuff to do. But because we can take our time doing these things and because we're not expecting to move anytime soon, it's going to be worth it in the long run. It's going to be worth the wait. And I just cannot wait until I get my studio built. That is going to be pretty awesome as well. So hopefully everyone is going to have a good, safe weekend. And without further ado, it is time for me to talk about
the Beer of the Week.
The beer of the week this week is Triple Jam from Blake's Hard Cider Company based out of Armada, Michigan. Now, I have actually done a review on one of their ciders before, and that was like the Mango Habanero one. That one was pretty good. But this one, I definitely had to do a review on the Triple Jam. This one is delicious. But first, before I actually talk about the beer itself, and I know it's not a beer, it's a cider, but you know what? Damn it, it's my show. I do what the hell I want to, all right? The history of the brewery. It started back in 1946, founded by Gerald and Lovey Blake, who decided they want to get in the business of farming. They started the cider mill where it's located to this day in Armada, not Colorado, Michigan. I don't know why it says Colorado. Pardon me. There they raised 13 children. Two of those children, Pete and Paul, they went to Michigan State University, but then returned to the family farm. And what started out as just a simple cider mill is now a tourist attraction. People come to their farm to pick their apples, fruits, and vegetables. And one of the other sons, Andrew, however, wanted to do some experimenting and brought the idea of hard cider to help the family business during the off-season of harvesting or in the event of bad harvesting. And in 2013, the three sons, Peter, and Paul, and Andrew, started Blake's Hard Cider Company. They initially predicted of starting off small with 15,000 gallons of hard cider a year. To say that they found their cider was in high demand is a drastic understatement. They ended up producing approximately 65,000 gallons in their first year. Soon other establishments were banging on the doors asking for their cider, and since then they have spent almost $4 million for expensive space for their fermentation tanks and the real estate. They've even moved their distribution to 18 other states to include Nevada, North Dakota, South Dakota, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and they're only looking to grow more from there. They also have other flavors like Grizzly Bear, Mango Habanero, which I've already done, and the hard cider, let alone the fact the Triple Jam, which I'm doing tonight. They even have on their cans their slogan, "From our backyard since 1946, which I absolutely love about it. Now to talk about the beer itself. It has an alcohol percentage of 6.5%, and the type of beer it is, it's a cider. Yes, it is a cider. Now I'm going to rate this on my rating system of mugs. 1 mug being the lowest, 5 being the highest. Price and presentation, it's a 5 out of 5. I bought the 6-pack at the VG's grocery store in Carroll, Michigan for $12.99. Now, it seems like a steep price for a 6-pack, but you know what? You get to bang for the buck for this cider. You can also buy the cider either on tap at Blake's Orchard, or if you want to, you can even buy it online. It's also available in most Michigan liquor stores as far as I find. But if you live outside the state of Michigan, or if you live outside the provinces or the states that I've actually mentioned, you can buy this online. The can itself is a purple base color with the light blue coloring of the sky. And now there's 3 types of fruit that are used to flavor this magnificent beverage: strawberry, blackberry, and raspberry. And on the can right there, you've got the strawberry, the blackberry, and the raspberry decked out to look like little itty-bitty cars because they got their 4 wheels and whatnot, but it's to identify the berries being used. And then at the very top right-hand corner, you see the words, "From our backyard since 1946, along with the shape of the state of Michigan, both the upper and the lower peninsula. I love this design, and I can definitely say this cider is definitely worth the purchase. It's a very appealing-looking can, and you know what? Like I said, it might be $12.99. You can probably get a cheaper 6-pack someplace else, but this is not your typical cider. This is a delicious cider. This is a delicious alcoholic beverage. So, again, a 5 out of 5. The pour. Well above average. Not much for the foamy head, but it has a very gorgeous color of light red. And I can only imagine what this would taste like fresh from their taps. It's a very easy pour. There might be some little bit of foamy head, but there's very little risk of it causing unnecessary overflow. Normally, some beers I rate based upon this. Like, if it doesn't have much foamy head, I kind of give it a 3 or a lower sometimes. But I decided to make an exception for this one because this is not your typical ale, beer, cider, what have you. The aroma, 5 out of 5, easy. This smells delicious. It has a very particular sweet smell to it. Now, you can definitely smell the mix of berries, but not one berry in particular sticks out more. It's kind of more of a sweet combination of all berries into one smell. It's kind of like that sweet berry flavor like the Juice Force IPA has, but it doesn't have that really hoppy bite smell to it, honestly. So, again, 5 mugs out of 5 mugs. The taste, another 5 out of 5. Now, if you're okay with sweet tasting ciders with a slight bite, this is your go-to. This is without a doubt my favorite hard cider done by this company. The taste is fantastic. It tastes better than smells, so rating this is a 5 out of 5 easily. Now, the medley of flavors is what makes it so good. Who cares if it's sweeter and has the taste of berries? It's delicious. It's awesome. I love it. Overall, I got to give it a 5 out of 5 with a badass seal of approval from me. This is a great hard cider. Now, usually hard cider is not the first thing that I'm going to go pursue when I'm in the beer aisle or the liquor store or what have you, but I have got to make an exception for this one. Anytime I see it, I like, you know what, I got to get this again because it always just tastes so good. It's always very refreshing to drink from, and I wouldn't really recommend drinking this one like from it if it being warm or whatnot or at room temperature. And I usually try to say, I prefer beers that I can drink at room temperature or cold. But honestly, you got to make an exception for this one. This is the kind of cider that you drink cold. It tastes really good, and I highly, highly recommend it. I mean, I really want to go down. One of these days, we need to make a road trip down to Blake's Cider, and I got to get this on tap because I love it so much. So I highly recommend this one. Please, please, please go out and buy this. And if you disagree with me, well, guess what? You're just wrong. It's okay to be objectively wrong, but this cider is delicious. I recommend it, once again, 5 mugs out of 5 mugs. And now, on to tonight's topics. So on Tuesday, Biden gave his State of the Union address. No, why are you clapping? I just mentioned that he gave his State of the Union. I mean, what are you doing? even say anything now. Why is there applause right now? I don't get it. Okay. This is, I don't, why is there still people still applauding? I haven't really said anything just yet. I mean, Okay, listen, this is really, really getting old. It's getting so old that Matt Gaetz is losing interest. Is that true, Congressman Gaetz?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Congressman Gaetz. Yeah, I said it. So anyway, the State of the Union started with its usual pomp and circumstance, and with the president acknowledging everyone, congratulating Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House, recognized the 118th Congress, and of course, what follows every other sentence being applause, with someone giving a standing ovation, which I was getting really, really tired of after the third time it happened. It's times like these where I truly do believe that the State of the Union should be held in the Oval Office. We don't need to see people clap for 2 minutes over the president, over him or her doing his job. It's really, really annoying. And, I understand that they want to recognize some people that have significant accomplishments or people that have recognized that they've lost. But, you can always invite them to the Oval Office and just have them sit across from you and just say, hey, this is Joe Smith over here, and this guy saved 50 kittens from a burning building. I mean, that's great. I would much rather do it like that because it's a little bit more personal. But I don't know. I just feel like, one sentence and there's massive applause and standing ovations. It's been annoying. It's been annoying since I first started really watching the State of the Unions under Obama. I just get tired of it, honestly. But what was even more annoying was the peanut gallery that consistently heckled the president over shit that turned out to be true. Now, the State of the Union is becoming more of a circus with some of the clowns who partake in it, especially the MAGA crowd. Yeah, the MAGA crowd. Marjorie Taylor Greene was her usual annoying self, dressed in a mink fur coat of some sort, and she couldn't keep her mouth shut. No big surprise. But I'm going to get into that in a bit. So while I would love to go over the whole State of the Union, it's an 80-minute speech, and I did not feel like cutting through. Besides, if you want to watch State of the Union, go on YouTube, type in Biden State of the Union 2023, and you can watch the whole damn thing. So I only picked certain topics that I felt were most important that really just kind of struck a chord with me, okay? Now, for the record, I don't own the rights to this audio, and they're only going to be like 1 or 2 minutes per person, okay? So first things first, Biden talked about infrastructure.
We're seeing these field of dreams transform to the heartland. But to maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. And folks, as you all know, we used to be number 1 in the world in infrastructure. We've sunk to 13th in the world. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system.
It's true. We are still 13th in the world in regards to infrastructure. I've covered this topic many, many times. Why? Because infrastructure is a very, very important topic to me. I think it's one of the biggest things that we need to focus on, and it's something that we need to continue focusing on because we are so far behind the rest of the developed world in this regard. Now, I've said, and I still think this is something we have needed to work on for decades, and this administration has put forth the effort with bipartisan support to get an infrastructure bill passed. Major credit, and I definitely said I was so glad to see that something like this was put forth. Biden even took time to thank Republicans who voted against it and says, hey, we're still going to build your area, so see you at the opening, essentially, which I think is the most hilarious bit of shade that you could throw at them. But here's what's funny about that. Usually, I don't really care for crap like that to be thrown around, but in this case, I'd say it's 100% called for. Far too many Republicans who thought the infrastructure bill was a joke and wanted nothing to do with it, like Rand Paul, are now asking for funding for projects needed in their districts, especially in these heavily Republican districts. Now, here's what's most amazing, is that Secretary Buttigieg, who's been traveling all over the country to help oversee these projects and has been to a mix of both blue and red states with blue and red districts, but he sees them as American districts, not red districts or blue districts, but American districts. Now, this is what's most important. Since then, roads and bridges have all been getting either repaired or they're in the process of being rebuilt or repaired. Now, we need projects like these to continue to make America better, because if the roads don't get fixed, you got to divert traffic, which takes time out of your day, which makes your commute longer. And for truck drivers, that means you got to divert, you got to plan ahead, because road construction is a pain in the ass, but it's an absolute necessity. I mean, I already covered in this topic about the bridge that separates Ohio and Kentucky, that they're going to be working on rebuilding that bridge because so much freight goes over that bridge, and it's really, really essential that they rebuild these things. Now, this is something they've been wanting to get done for a long time. An infrastructure bill like this is highly essential, and it's past due that we actually put forth an effort to make things better in this country. Now, they also talked about the lead pipes and whatnot. Now, granted, the funding is not going to fix every lead pipe across the country. But from what I understand, it's going to be like 400,000 some lead pipes that's going to be fixed, so that way they have access to good, clean drinking water, essentially, which is good. This is a good thing. This is something that we do need to focus upon, because drinking water is essential to the rights of humanity, to the rights of humans, because some people don't have the luxury of, just going to the grocery store and buying liters and liters of bottles of water. Clean, fresh drinking water is good because, you need to bathe in it, you need to wash with it, you need to brush your teeth with it, you need to drink water from it. And if you have a contaminated water system, how are you going to survive in a situation like that? I mean, look at Flint, for example. We've discussed the situation about Flint time and time again, because the government of Michigan at the time, led by Rick Snyder, wanted to save some money, so they decided to cut the people of Flint off from Detroit water and give them their own water, but they screwed the pooch because there was lead piping in there and basically contaminated all their drinking water, and la-di-da, this is what you get. This is what happens when you try to cut corners and you don't try to do things the right way. Infrastructure is heavily, heavily important and needs to be emphasized upon. The last time we had a huge infrastructure project like this was in the days of Eisenhower, when he built the interstate highways. Now, you can say, oh, well, those interstate highways were for the event that we were invaded. You could get the army from one spot to the country. Yeah, I get that. I remember and I know the history about it. I know why it was built. But the fact of the matter is interstate highways are utilized by everybody, especially truck drivers. It makes the commutes better. It makes it easier to get from produce or product or whatever from the rails to the deliverers, the shippers, the receivers, what have you. They are an absolute necessity, which is why we need to continue to emphasize on this. And I don't want to look at this as a left or right or Republican or Democrat issue. This is an American issue. Infrastructure is very important. And the fact that they were able to get a bipartisan agreement under his first year in office is huge. And the fact that we are starting to really see progress in this regard is absolutely massive, and I can't say enough good things about this. They also talked about Big Oil.
Have you noticed Big Oil just reported its profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion in the midst of a global energy crisis. I think it's outrageous. Why? They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells, all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade, and that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding the CEOs and shareholders. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's why I propose we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term investments.
This is also correct. In 2022 alone, oil companies like BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil, Shell, and Total Energies raked in $199.3 billion in record profits. Now, let's make no mistake about it. We will need these petrol products well beyond the next 10 years. Like, I even say that we're going to need petrol products for the next 100 years, okay? And that's just, that might be an over-exaggeration, but, for the time being, we need petrol products for pretty much everything. It runs everything that we utilize today. Now, solar energy and wind energy, I'm completely bought into it. I believe these are good things, especially Teslas, cars, and trucks. These are all effective, but they are not long-term solutions just yet because the proof of concept has to be proven. Now, again, I'm all about the transition over to green energy because green energy jobs are still on the rise across the country, but they need to be a long-term solution for, like, say, for example, if they can prove that green energy can sustain, like, entire metropolis cities, then guess what? You've proven the concept, and therefore you know that it'll work for the long term. But for the time being, we still need petrol products for the time being. Now, some of these Teslas have a problem sustaining their charges because of cold weather, but that's how you make the technology better. You don't just give up on it because on the first sign of trouble. That's a 3-foot wall excuse. For those not aware, the 3-foot wall excuse is at the first sign of trouble, you stop, you realize, oh, damn, I couldn't get over this way, therefore I'm just going to quit. People want to give up on Tesla just because, well, not because Elon Musk owns it, but because they think, oh, this just doesn't actually work. Technology advances. It gets better over time. You can't expect it to work on the first go-around. Now, I haven't bought any of these things yet. I haven't bought anything like a Tesla, anything yet, because I don't want to. I'm sure if other people buy it, that's entirely up to them. But these, again, are not long-term because the proof of concept has got to sustain over a long period of time. Now, again, I'm all about the solar energy. I'm all about the wind energy, all that kind of stuff, right? But for the time being, we still need these petrol products and whatnot. Now, none of us were happy in 2022 with the gas prices being insanely high. It was the highest I've ever seen gas, as a matter of fact. But, of course, around 2022 is when I started seeing the memes of, man, I really wish I had mean tweets for $1.86 a gallon. Well, once again, here's my response to that. If your integrity and your morality can be bought for $1.86 a gallon, that is entirely your business. For me, my integrity cannot be bought for $1.86 a gallon. Gas could have been $10 a gallon, and I still would have been pissed, but I still would have gladly voted for Biden. Easily. Now, I keep saying this, but it's clearly it's not getting through to people. The president has very minimal impact on the price of gas, whether people realize it or not. When Congress last year put out a standalone bill to prevent price gouging at the pump, it passed the House, but not the Senate. The people who voted against it just implied that they were empty bills and wouldn't help the average American. All they say is, well, Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline. This is false. The Keystone Pipeline is still in operation, for crying out loud. You were talking about the Keystone XL Pipeline, which I have stated over and over and over again. The XL pipeline was initially shut down in 2020 by the Supreme Court due to environmental concerns, which are legitimate concerns. Anyone who says otherwise is kidding themselves or they are flat out lying. Hell, the Keystone Pipeline just recently had a spill. Thousands and thousands of gallons of oil is leaking out. Now, there is a huge concern about this. Now, I understand that oil being transported by pipeline is still the safest way for the time being. But there's still an environmental concern. It's not a matter of if, but when the pipelines burst. Now, I am definitely trusting and hoping that more companies begin to crack down on the pipelines to make sure that they have less of a failure rate. But technology breaks. It's just the fact of the matter. Technology is not perfect. It is capable of breaking at any time. And then the environmental concerns about this, and even if you say, oh, well, it's only like a few thousand gallons. Well, guess what? Those few thousand gallons could end up in somebody's drinking water, and guess what? We just talked about how water is essential to people surviving. Not just people, but wildlife surviving as well. With summer coming up, what do you think is going to happen if a water source is contaminated because of an oil spill? It's these things that we have got to take into consideration. But, you know, the GOP just does not want to hear this. And again, even if gas was $10 a gallon, I would still be pissed. But the thing is, the president does not control the price of gas. He doesn't. He's got very, very minimal impact. As a matter of fact, part of the reason is, yes, because Russia decided to invade Ukraine, and then they cut off their oil supply from the rest of the world because Russia does supply oil to parts of the country. Our country even, as a matter of fact. Bet you didn't know that, did you? If you didn't know that, I highly suggest you look it up. But it's true, though. Oil is a global commodity. We trade it all throughout the world. Yes, we even trade with China. We have given China oil. Biden's given oil to China. Trump's given oil to China. Obama's given oil. Everyone's given oil to China. This is nothing new, but yet the GOP, the MAGA crowd especially, wants to make it seem like this is a national security crisis, and they actually want to impeach Biden over this. It's completely ludicrous. But at the end of the day, what Biden stated here about big oil is 100% correct. They also brought, again, Medicare and Social Security.
Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look, folks, the idea is that we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond.
It's also accurate. Don't let people on the right tell you this isn't true. Biden chose not to name names, but he doesn't need to. Anybody that knows how to do research on these topics knows who wants to do this. Rick Scott from Florida proposed a plan in 2022 to sunset all federal legislation after 5 years. This also includes Social Security and Medicare. I've talked about this before. But of course, then you got Marjorie Taylor Greene calling Biden a liar. She went as far as to say on social media that she doesn't applaud liars. Well, that's kind of funny. She sure seemed to not have any problem of kissing Trump's ass and applauding him. Why? Mostly because she wants that running mate position. And more than likely, she's going to get that nod from Trump. Why? Because for some ungodly reason, the MAGA crowd loves her. Maybe it's because she is just as batshit crazy as he is. She's an election denier, a January 6th insurrectionist sympathizer, and someone who has only recently complained about having to do her freaking job. I mean, I could talk about this all day, but she's talked about how she does not like doing her job. They covered it on The Daily Show with Chelsea Handler, and I highly recommend you go check it out. It's absolutely hilarious. But the thing is, though, is that the fact that you had people heckling and booing and whatnot, that's completely immature shit. I don't even remember a time when Democrats did that when Trump was in office. I mean, I was thinking, it's like, why the hell doesn't anybody say anything about this? But the thing is that everyone thought it was hilarious that Biden was being called a liar. But they didn't like it when Nancy Pelosi ripped up a copy of the State of the Union address. People lost their shit over that. Like, the GOP, especially the MAGA crowd, was losing their mind because she ripped up an address because it had the name of a Medal of Honor recipient on there. Oh, unclutch your pearls, please. You don't really care about that name. You just didn't like the fact that she did that as a power move in front of Trump. But the reason why she did that is because Trump did not want to shake her hand at the beginning of the State of the Union. Why? Because he's a partisan hack, and he doesn't like it when people aren't loyal to him. That's the kind of guy Donald Trump is. Now, does anybody remember, like, whenever Donald Trump was called out on something, or whenever people tried to fact check him, he said it was fake news, but he never said as to why? Well, Biden did say, listen, if you don't believe me, contact my office. We'll provide you a copy. He didn't want to mention any names. He felt like he didn't have to, which is fair. But he did say, feel free to contact my office, and we'll give you the legislation that they wanted to get passed. Thankfully, it didn't pass, and everybody, even Kevin McCarthy, says that's completely off the table. They're not going to use that to solve the problem with the debt ceiling, which is good. Because we need to remember something. Medicare and Social Security. There are people in this country that need Social Security. And I've had this argument many, many times with people on Discord, Facebook, what have you, about whether it's necessary to keep Social Security. I still say, yes, we need to keep it. They say, well, what if I don't want to use it? It's like, well, okay, give your money to somebody else. It's like, what if I want to invest in stocks and bonds? I say you can still invest in stocks and bonds. But not everybody feels the same way as you do. People that have retired need Social Security. It's beneficial to them. It keeps them from having to go to work again. And what's crazy enough is the fact that there are people in this country that think, well, you know, people are living longer nowadays, so let's keep people working well into their 70s so that way we don't have to pay them Social Security. That is absolutely criminal in my opinion. You should not be forcing and mandating that people should be forced to work. I mean, 65, I'd say, is more than fair. More than fair. But yet, they got the same people that are complaining about Social Security are the same ones complaining that, oh, well, people older than 60 should not be running for president, Congress, what have you. But yet, we're going to expect them to work regular 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, you got people working 9-to-5 jobs in their 70s because they can't afford to live where they're at. This is why Social Security is necessary. This is why Medicare, Medicaid is necessary to take care of those that need it. And the fact that people were out there willing to negotiate and wanting to talk about this. And you know, Biden even said it's not every Republican, but yet everybody once again lost their freaking mind saying, oh my God, he's attacking all Republicans. All Republicans want to take away Social Security. No, he said it's some Republicans. It might only be one Republican, but you know what? He didn't blast the whole Republican Party. But people are just too paranoid. They're just losing their shit over this. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. But they also talked about the border. All right. This is the one that's really got to rub some feathers the wrong way.
Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. You got it. So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs. Strong penalties to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. Second, let's do more on mental health, especially for our children. When millions of young people are struggling with bullying, violence, trauma, we give them greater access to mental health care at their schools.
In 2022 alone, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has seized over 379 million doses of fentanyl. I say again, that's doses. That's approximately 656,000 pounds of fentanyl. Already this year, we've got 169,000 pounds that have been seized along the southern border. Now, you already heard the buffoons in the peanut gallery blaming Biden for all these seizures. Now, does anybody want to take a stab at how many seizures there were in 2021? 913,000. And approximately 2020, 1.1 million. Now, according to the Border Patrol, the majority of fentanyl seizures take place at legal ports of entry, and the majority of the people who are trafficking this are U.S. citizens. The southern border is not open. Now, as a matter of fact, staffing levels have apparently remained the same consistent between the last administration and this administration. Now, I'm going to play another bit of audio, right? From a freshman, Representative Maxwell Frost from Florida's 10th District. He really put the screws to the Border Patrol agents in regards to policies along the southern border. And I got to give credit to the Young Turks. I saw this on the Young Turks, and I was like, yes, I've got to use this. And again, I don't own the rights to this, but this is absolutely phenomenal. He talks about two things. He talks about seizures at the southern border, who's responsible for that, and whether the southern border is open or not. Let's hear this.
Would you agree that the narrative being peddled right now that says that an insane amount of fentanyl is being brought into this country by illegal immigrants specifically, would you say that is true?
Sir, again, we're here to report on the facts on border security. I probably differ from giving an opinion on anything in the news right
With the data, right?
because that's probably doubtful. I can't
Yeah.
provide
all
a
good.
factual
Thank you, Chief.
statement.
No, I appreciate it. I agree, right? It has to be rooted in the data. You know, a Cato Institute report and CBP data shows that more than 85% of the illicit fentanyl entering the United States is brought in by citizens of the United States of America. So, Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2022 Cato Institute report demonstrating that illicit fentanyl is primarily trafficked by U.S. citizens at lawful ports of entry. For many folks around the country who might only watch far-right media or just listen to even some of the folks on this committee, I'm curious, Chief Chavez, when President Biden took office, did your agents stop enforcing the border and just allow everybody to come in, thus creating what we hear here is an open border? Did that happen when the president took office?
Sir, thank you for your question. The answer is no, sir.
Okay,
we
thank you.
continue to enforce policy and laws.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Chief Modlin, when President Biden took office, did the border just open and did y'all stop enforcing your policies?
Also, thank you for your question, sir. I can tell you this is the fifth administration I've worked for, starting with the Clinton administration, and Border Patrol agents do their job every day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Look, as y'all probably realized by now, a lot of these hearings are not really about solutions. They're about politics. And for me, I believe solutions must be rooted in facts.
So unless these chiefs who work on the Border Patrol are lying, this completely debunks and shreds any argument anyone has in regards to border policy. Get mad if you want, cope and seethe if you must, but you just heard two representatives from the Border Patrol ask direct questions, and they have proven that the rhetoric you hear about open borders and fentanyl being brought in predominantly by illegal immigrants is all bullshit. Facts and data do not lie, but the panicked people of the far-right movement do. Those who make these allegations are full of it. But I cannot control what people think or hear. That's not why I do this podcast. I do it because I think people need to hear it from a different perspective. I used to have a different perspective in regards to the issue on the border, mainly because I only listen to one side of the story. Now, don't get me wrong. We do have a border policy that does, in fact, need some work. However, we have a serious backlog in this country that makes it difficult for some people to become citizens, let alone the fact that some people will wait weeks, months, and sometimes even years, decades to become citizens. They don't really get hardly any of the benefits many other Americans get, though, yet they still pay taxes in this country and receive very few benefits. Now, I don't want to get into further detail on my beliefs, but all I know is that this whole idea that we have open borders is a lie. The concept of mostly immigrants that are traffickers bringing fentanyl into our country is also a lie. And so without proper data from those on the extreme right who spread this bullshit, what exactly else are they getting wrong? What else are they lying to the American people upon? I mean, I'm going to play audio from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's going to say the exact same thing about open borders. But it's not true. There are no open borders. Are some people still managing to get across our borders? Of course there is. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But the majority of people that come into this country come across points of entry. That's where all the fentanyl is being seized at the port of entry. So is Border Patrol lying? Who are we listening to exactly? Who is spreading this propaganda? I'll tell you who. The people that want to spread disorder and chaos and want people to believe that nothing is being done on the southern border. Now that Biden's been on the southern border, it's still not good enough because it took him forever to get down to the southern border. But you have to understand something. It's misinformation like this that people that are unwilling to do their own research are just going to keep believing the bullshit people on the right. They're going to tell you, oh, we've got an open border right now, and now we've got fentanyl coming in, and then right now we got... Listen, we don't need you adding to the problem. We don't need you adding fuel to the fire. We've already got 70,000 people a year that die from fentanyl overdose. But we have a problem in this country of getting people help that they need. And throwing people in prison because they're using drugs is not the answer. But again, I don't want to really go into too much detail about this. You already know how I feel about decriminalization of drugs. That doesn't mean that everyone's going to start using drugs. It just means you're going to fund more treatment centers so that way people can get better. You got to make the process work, and you got to make the programs work to get people off these drugs. But it's just absolutely absurd how people continue to spread this lie when I just played you the audio that told you exactly what's going on. It's not biased. It is factual. Again, facts and data do not lie, but the people that spread these rumors do lie. The last thing I'll cover under the State of the Union was the deficit now and under Trump. Now, there was audio that I just decided not to go into this regard, but the claim is that under Trump, 25% of the national debt that took over 200 years to accumulate was added by that one administration, and that would be Trump's administration. This is true, but I do need to add some context to this, okay? The largest spike in the national debt came due to COVID pandemic relief legislation, which I think a lot of us can agree we desperately needed that in this country. Now, while Trump signed the laws, this was, in fact, there was broad bipartisan support for this. Now, Obama's national debt, by the numbers, was, in fact, larger than Trump's, but that's because he served over 8 years. Trump, however, only served 4. Now, according to PolitiFact, they figured that by dividing the debt accumulated by the years they have served, Biden has seen the largest rise in debt, with Trump second and Obama coming in third. Now, what's to say the national debt won't rise to much higher levels under Biden? Who knows? All that can be certain is that the national debt keeps climbing and will continue to do so. Now, what solutions have both parties offered? Not too many. Why? Because there are projects that are necessary to keep the country functioning, but we haven't seen a surplus in the country since Bill Clinton was left office. And then once the war on terror took place, that's when the national debt started climbing. Now, all in all, what did I think of the State of the Union? I didn't hate it, but I also wasn't like leaping for joy throughout it. To me, talk is cheap. I want to see both sides of the aisle working together like they have done to pass important legislation. Now, one of the best bills I've seen passed along, aside from the infrastructure bill, was the PACT Act. Something I felt that was long overdue, ensuring veterans like myself who were exposed to toxic burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan receive proper care and treatment. Now, bipartisanship is possible, but when you have a bunch of heckling morons who don't give a shit about doing what's right for the country but only want to appease one person, that's when you will have problems. Those who want to cause problems need to be expelled or voted out. Now, I'm all for Republicans and Democrats working together as long as it benefits the constituents as a whole. Now, I doubt the next State of the Union will be any different next year. It's going to reflect on accomplishments made, but the division is going to continue to be sown by those who feel it's more important to be partisan than to be patriotic. This audio now I'm going to play is of Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders of the state of Arkansas. I will play the whole thing, and I will stop each time I need to address a point or just blast it for being absurdly stupid. Now, for the record, I have never, ever been a fan of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She was an atrocious press secretary, and she played the whataboutism game more than anybody else I have ever seen. She was divisive, combative, and incapable of answering any direct questions by the press. Now that she is governor for the state of Arkansas, we're only going to imagine how things turn out for them. Again, I do not own the rights to this audio.
I'm Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Being a mom to 3 young children taught me not to believe every story I hear. So forgive me for not believing much of anything I heard tonight from President Biden. From out-of-control inflation and violent crime to the dangerous border crisis and threat from China.
Really? Well, I already addressed the border issue, so she's already off to a really bad start. The security threat from China? I'm sorry. Is she read in on these intelligence reports? Is she out of her frickin' mind?
Biden and the Democrats have failed you. They know it, and you know it. And it's time for a change. Tonight, let us reaffirm our commitment to a timeless American idea that government exists not to rule the people, but to serve the people. Democrats want to rule us with more government control, but that's not who we are.
Really? Who wants to outlaw CRT, which again is not being taught in high school or even elementary school, but who wants to control the curriculum again? Who wants to control women's bodies? Who is it that's trying to make it difficult for people to receive gender-affirming care that even a receptionist at a clinic can deny? Explain to me, who is trying to control that?
America is the greatest country the world has ever known because we're the freest country.
Okay, we are not the freest country in the world by any metric. We have the highest incarceration population per capita, a broken criminal justice system, and if you don't stand for the anthem, you are demeaned and belittled and told to leave your country for exercising your constitutional right? What makes us so free exactly?
The world has ever known, with a people who are strong and resilient. 5 months ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. It was a hard time for our family, particularly our kids, Scarlett, Huck, and George. But we kept our faith and persevered. Thanks to exceptional doctors here in Arkansas, a successful surgery, and the grace of God, I am cancer-free. Through it all, I couldn't help but think about my mom. She was 20 years old and in her first year of marriage when she was diagnosed with spinal cancer. The doctors told her she might not live, and if she did live, they said she'd never walk again. And if she did walk, she'd definitely never have children. The daughter she was told she'd never have was just sworn in as the new governor of Arkansas and is speaking to you tonight. Adversity and fear of the unknown can paralyze us, but faith propels us to charge boldly ahead. We can't stand still in the face of great challenges. You and I were put on this earth for such a time as this, to charge boldly ahead. I'll be the first to admit, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. I'm for freedom. He's for government control.
Source, Sarah, source. What are you basing this on? What government control are you talking about? Please emphasize.
At 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country. And at 80, he's the oldest president in American history. I'm the first woman to lead my state. And he's the first man to surrender his presidency to a woke mob that can't even tell you what a woman is.
Ah, look, another jab at the trans community. What's the name of this woke leftist mob exactly, Governor Huckabee Sanders? I mean, tell me, what's the source of this, please?
In the radical left's America, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. But you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race.
Children are not systemically being taught to hate one another. This is a fantasy. If a teacher is teaching that, they need to be fired yesterday. Teaching history lessons isn't teaching kids to hate one another. Now, again, do you have an example of this actually taking place? Do you have something to prove that this took place?
But not to love one another or our great country. Whether Joe Biden believes this madness or is simply too weak to resist it, his administration has been completely hijacked by the radical left. The dividing line in America is no longer between right or left. The choice is between normal or crazy.
And you're part of the crazy.
It's time
Sarah.
for a new generation of Republican leadership. Upon taking office just a few weeks ago, I signed executive orders to ban CRT, racism, and indoctrination in our schools.
Banning CRT is not actually going to do anything. Now, that is just an empty bill. And what indoctrination are you worried about exactly? I can guarantee every dollar in my bank account, if we as a country mandated on Christian teachings in school and nothing else, I can guarantee you would probably leap all over that like a kangaroo. But what indoctrination are you talking about exactly? And CRT is taught in law schools, not in elementary schools or high schools. It's just a theory anyway.
Eliminate the use of derogatory term Latinx in our government, repealed COVID orders, and said never again to authoritarian mandates and shutdowns. Americans want common sense from their leaders.
Common sense was doing shutdowns. Shutdowns saved millions of lives. The data is all there. Shutdowns saved lives. But I guess common sense isn't helping you out there, is it?
But in Washington, the Biden administration is doubling down on crazy. President Biden inherited the fastest economic recovery on record.
Bzz, wrong. Biden inherited a net loss of jobs because Trump didn't take COVID seriously. Unemployment peaked at 14.7%. Now, 14.7%, and by the time he left the president, it was at 8.4%. So while unemployment was going down due to the new norms, Trump's job creation and unemployment rate barely moved during his tenure as president. He inherited a better economy than the one he gave Biden. Now, COVID, granted, may have played a huge part in this, but had he taken his job more seriously, not downplayed it, he could have very well saved his presidency and saved more lives. But he didn't, though. That is what's factual.
The most secure border in history, cheap, abundant, homegrown energy, fast rising wages, a rebuilt military.
I keep hearing rebuilt military, but there's no metrics, no stats, no evidence, or anything to back it up with. Empty words, world. And guess what? She's going to lie again. She's going to say the world was at peace.
And a world that was stable and at peace.
False.
But over the last 2 years, Democrats destroyed it all. Despite Democrats' trillions in reckless spending and mountains of debt, we now have the worst border crisis in American history.
False.
As a mom, my heart breaks for every parent who has lost a son or daughter to addiction. 100,000 Americans a year are now killed from drug overdoses, largely from fentanyl pouring across our southern border. Yet the Biden administration refuses to secure the border and save American lives.
False.
And after years of Democrat attacks on law enforcement and calls to defund the police, violent criminals roam free.
Biden already said in his State of the Union, and he's been saying since he's been in office, that he believes in good cops and has not said a word about defunding the police. She is just lying her face off now.
While law-abiding families live in fear. Beyond our border from Afghanistan to Ukraine, from North Korea to Iran, President Biden's weakness puts our nation and the world at risk. And the president's refusal to stand up to China, our most formidable adversary, is dangerous and unacceptable. President Biden is unwilling to defend our border, defend our skies, and defend our people. He is simply unfit to serve as commander-in-chief. And while you reap the consequences of their failures, the Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day.
What? Woke fantasies? She's the one that's really consumed by these woke fantasies. She said woke like 6 times so far, but yet she has not shown any evidence. She has not backed up any of her statements. All she's saying is a yakety yakety yak, a woke fantasies, buzzwords. That's all she's doing. Goodness gracious.
Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace. But we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. Every day we are told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols. All while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech.
I'm sorry, but it's just so funny listening to her lie.
It's not normal. It's crazy. And it's wrong. Make no mistake. Republicans will not surrender this fight. We will lead with courage and do what's right, not what's politically correct or convenient. Republicans believe in an America where strong families thrive in safe communities, where jobs are abundant and paychecks are rising, where the freedom our veterans shed their blood to defend is the birthright of every man, woman, and child. These are the principles Republican governors are fighting for, and in Washington, under the leadership of Senate Republicans and Speaker Kevin McCarthy, we will hold the Biden administration accountable. Down the street from where I sit is my alma mater, Little Rock Central High. As a student there, I will never forget watching my dad, Governor Mike Huckabee, and President Bill Clinton hold the doors open to the Little Rock Nine. Doors that 40 years earlier had been closed to them because they were black. Today, those children once barred from the schoolhouse are now heroes memorialized in bronze at our State House. I'm proud of the progress our country has made, and I believe giving every child access to a quality education, regardless of their race or income.
Just as long as in that scary CRT stuff that they would end up learning in college and law school, right? We sure don't want students learning about real American history, right? Listen, if you're going to keep children away from learning about our nation's history in its entirety because you're too sensitive about it and only want to make America be looked at as always as the good guy, you're not teaching history. You're teaching a version of history that's going to cripple them mentally, essentially. You're not doing them any favors right now.
Is the civil rights issue of our day. Tomorrow, I will unveil an education package that will be the most far-reaching, bold, conservative education reform in the country.
That is frightening to think about.
My plan empowers parents with real choices, improves literacy and career readiness, and helps put a good teacher in every classroom by increasing their starting salary from one of the lowest to one of the highest in the nation. Here in Arkansas and across America, Republicans are working to end the policy of trapping kids in failing schools and sentencing them to a lifetime of poverty. We will educate, not indoctrinate our kids, and put students on a path to success. It's time for a new generation to lead. This is our moment. This is our opportunity.
Okay, so Arkansas ranks 41st in education right now. You sure got your work cut out for you now, don't you? And as far as, like, we don't want children to be left behind, well, guess what? When you put somebody like Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education, she doesn't do jack diddly squat for 4 years, you're not exactly doing any favors now. Now you're concerned about the children? Give me a break. You just don't want people to learn what you don't want them to learn because it makes you uncomfortable. That's all it is.
A new generation born in the waning decades of the last century, shaped by economic booms and stock market busts, forged by the triumph of the Cold War and the tragedy of 9/11. A generation brimming with passion and new ideas to solve age-old problems. A generation moored to our deepest values and oldest traditions, yet unafraid to challenge the present order and find a better way forward. If we seize this moment together, America can once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave. During my 2.5 years at the White House, I traveled on every foreign trip with the president. A trip I will never forget was on December 25th of 2018. My husband Brian and I had just cleaned up wrapping paper that was shoved into every corner of our house, thanks to our 3 kids. When I had to walk out on my own family's Christmas, unable to tell them where I was going that night, because the place I'd be traveling was so dangerous, they didn't want anybody to know that the president was going to be on the ground, even for a few hours. We boarded Air Force One in complete and total darkness. There were no lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. Our phones and computers shut down and turned in. We were going completely off the grid. Nearly 12 hours later, in the pitch black of night, we landed in the war-torn part of western Iraq. It was again a similar scene. No lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. The only thing you could see was coming from about a mile away in a dining hall where hundreds of troops who were in the fight against ISIS had gathered expecting to celebrate Christmas with senior military leadership from around the region. They had absolutely no idea that the president and first lady were about to walk into that room. And when they did, it was a sight and a scene and a sound I hope I never forget. The room erupted. Men and women from every race, religion, and region, every political party, every demographic you can imagine, started chanting in perfect unison over and over and over again, USA, USA, USA. It was an absolutely perfect picture of what makes our country great. One of the young soldiers yelled from the back, "Mr. President, I re-enlisted in the military because of you." And the president...
That soldier is such an ass kisser. If that even really happened. I mean, come on. I re-enlisted because of you, Mr. President. Oh, shut up already. That's just... Oh, God, that just makes me sick.
It said...
Not because he re-enlisted, but the fact that you would say, I re-enlisted because of this president. Oh, God, how cringy is that? Ugh. I re-enlisted not because of any president. I did it because it was for my betterment, okay? God.
Son, I'm here because of you. Shortly after, that young soldier came up to me. He said, "Sarah, you have a tough job." I told him, "What I do is nothing."
What's his name?
You take bombs and bullets.
Say his name.
That's a tough job. And in a moment that I know I'll cherish for the rest of my life, that soldier reached up and he pulled the Brave Rifles patch he wore on his shoulder, and he placed it into my hand, a sign of ultimate respect. And he said, "Sarah, we are in this together." Overwhelmed with emotion and speechless, I just hugged him with tears in my eyes and a grateful heart for our heroes who keep us free. That young man and everyone who has served before him, all of those who serve alongside him, and the thousands we know who will be called upon to serve after him, deserve to know they have a country and a community back home doing our part in the fight for freedom. America is great because we are free. But today, our freedom is under attack, and the America we love is in danger. President Biden and the Democrats have failed you.
We can all do this together, but the Democrats have failed you. This is a public service announcement brought to you by Sarah Huckabee Sanders from Arkansas.
And it's time for a change. A new generation of Republican leaders are stepping up, not to be caretakers of the status quo, but to be change makers for the American people. We know not what the future holds, but we know who holds the future in his hands. And with God as our witness, we will show the world that America is still the place where freedom reigns and liberty will never die. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.
Okay, that was 14 minutes and 34 seconds of complete bullshit. While I gave the Trump administration credit for heading to Iraq on Christmas Day, but her going from "we love our troops" to "Democrats want to ruin this country" is a problem. A massive portion of what she said from this video is not true. It's a piece of fiction. Good luck working with both sides of the aisle on that one. The thing is, here's what I'd like to ask the governor of Arkansas. Will she deny infrastructure projects that Arkansas needs, or will she be a person of principle and deny it? I mean, come on. Her state ranks 43rd in infrastructure in this country. So what will you do, Madam Governor, in that scenario? Now, I thought Ron DeSantis was a bad governor, but now that Sarah is governor, she could very well take the throne. But I'm not going to be too hasty. This speech, though, if this is a sign of things to come for her long term, let's just say it's not going to paint a very flattering picture. To conclude this evening's podcast, I will reiterate, talk is cheap. I want to see some stuff put into motion. I don't want to hear about how things are star-spangled awesome in this country. I need to see it. The quality of life in this country is good in some areas, don't get me wrong, but there is a huge need for improvement in other parts. We still have a lot of issues to sort out in this country. Our justice system is not equal. We have an issue of systemic racism in this country. People who are members of the LGBTQ plus community are being degraded and discriminated against. Inflation, while dropping, is still high. Political division is still at an all-time high. Cancel culture is still alive in this country. And some people still need to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. But even with everything that's going wrong, I do believe in long term, we can get past the issues of today. Now, it's going to require some things what I call problem solving. But the first step in solving a problem is recognizing that there is one. Then you have to do is then you gather all available data of the problem. You analyze the criteria. You generate possible solutions. You analyze possible solutions. You compare possible solutions. And then you make and implement a decision afterwards. That's part of the 7 Army problem solving steps there. We sometimes cannot get past step 1. Now, why is that? Now, as of right now, we tend to look at problems from a political biased perspective. In order to get past step 1, some of us just need to drop the ego and worry about the problems that might make us too uncomfortable to move forward. That's what we need to do. It does suck, yes, but denying what's real because your feelings are getting in the way isn't helping the problem. The real deal isn't an easy place. The real world is not an easy place for us to live in for anyone. It's worse than if you're not considered a part of the social norm. Now, I don't believe in my lifetime we'll be sitting around a campfire singing "Give Peace a Chance" by John Lennon. We are factioned in this country based upon race, religion, color, creed, sexual orientation, sexual identity, and honestly, I'm going to say it. Our diversity, though, is our strength. All of these things is what makes us great. It isn't a weakness. By accepting these differences is the first step in accepting the person for who they are. Now, I am just as guilty for being so judgmental of other people, but that's for me to work out on my own time and my own accord. But if the logic matches up, then I will accept it. It's why I am far more progressive now than I was last year and the year before that and the year before that. Not because of some woke leftist mob, because the progressive side of the house is, but it's because the progressive side is addressing issues that I think need to be fixed. Now, I believe that these issues are ones that we need to focus upon. That's my wheelhouse, though. What you believe is entirely in your court. Now, I accept that not everybody thinks the same way as I do. That's fine. I know you and I, whoever's listening, will disagree on some issues. This is also normal. Disagreement is fine, but how you handle that disagreement is how you can eventually come to a general consensus. I disagree with you, but I respect your belief. Now, to be fair, there are times where even that might get challenged, but let's just say that's on a case-by-case basis. In closing, Thank you so much for all who decide to listen to the live show or listen to the replay. I appreciate the support I receive from everyone, and I appreciate the words of encouragement that I get to keep this show rolling. If this is your first time listening, please, once again, do me a solid and hit like and share this podcast. Go to my YouTube channel, The Alex Kirsch Project, to my Spotify or iHeartRadio, and show me some love and support. Share this on any social media platform that you use. Thanks again to everyone, and I hope everyone has a safe weekend. Good night. This has been a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's podcast. Thank you and good night.